Okay, so we'll continue with the Hoare logic today. Let's review very quickly about what we have learned so far, some rules, okay? And do not lose the big picture. So if you think about it, so this is a formula or visualization you want to have in your mind. So when you're being asked questions on the exam, okay? Let me just go over it again together with you, okay? It's really important diagram. Basically, this is the so-called Hoare triple, okay? Given any program, presumably in Eiffel syntax, what can be translated to Java as well. Q, precondition, R, postcondition. So these are the specification of your program. S will be program. So far, we talk about assignments, we talk about if conditionals, also we'll talk about sequential composition. We will talk about loops today. Okay, that's the main focus today. We'll get there. And then how do you prove the program you translate into Hoare triple is actually correct? You have to say the following. Okay, so this is the implication you have to either prove or disapprove. To do that, first of all, you got to calculate the so-called weakest precondition. So that will be the weakest precondition for your implementation to establish the postcondition R. So thinking this way, this is your implementation over here. Okay, let me just color that. This is your implementation here. Somehow by executing the implementation, I want to achieve no more and no less, just the postcondition. There is a systematic way to calculate what would be the weakest precondition. And if once we apply what we learned in the class, if this is a so-called weakest precondition, anything that sits outside of the weakest precondition will be invalid. Meaning that if you take this particular input value outside the weakest precondition, you cannot establish the postcondition that's desired. Okay, that's kind of the idea. And now, how do we prove that our program is correct? You want to make sure the precondition you have for your program is a subset over here. Okay? So that's why we're proving for implication. So that's kind of the picture we've been discussing last time in details. Okay? Any question about this visualization here? Okay? We basically put everything together here. We got precondition, we got postcondition, we got program, and also got WP. We'll talk more about WP today. Okay. All right. I assume you're okay. And then, so far, we talked about 3 WP rules. Let me review them with you very quickly. Okay, that's also on your slides. The first case we talked about is assignments. Okay, and also we talked about if conditional, and also we talked about sequential composition last time. Okay, so that's the last rule we talked about. In the case of the assignments over here, you simply replace the postcondition you want to establish, replace every occurrence of x just by E. Okay, we talked about intuition last time. Please review the lecture notes if you don't feel comfortable. And then for the if conditional, we also spent quite a bit of time last time. If you want to do it, you want to make sure you use conjunction to actually combine the two together. Okay, because you want to make sure not only branch number 1 can establish R, but also branch number 2 can also establish R. So it should be a conjunction. Okay? In the exam, I'll talk more about it towards the end of today. In the exam, we will give you these rules. You don't have to memorize. Okay? You just need to know how to apply them and use them. Okay? The third one that we talked about last time was about sequential composition. Okay? The way to think about it is like this. If you got S1 followed by S2, think about there is certain intermediate states over here. Immediately after S1 is terminated, that would be the starting states for S2, right? So we can think about this is the ending states for S1. Also, the start states simultaneously for S2. What we really want to achieve is, at the end of it, we want to achieve R upon the termination of S2. So how do we achieve that? In order to do that, we want to calculate the following. We want to calculate, for example, WP of, in order for S1 to terminate, it must be good enough so that this particular terminating state as intermediates is the WP for S2 to establish R. Okay? We talked about intermediate state last time. Okay? So that will be over here. So that will be the WP for S2 to establish R. Okay? I'm just going quickly just to review. Okay? Any question about these rules over here? That's pretty much where we left off. Okay. All right. And this is the example that we left off from last time. So in the exam, you'll be given something similar to this. Maybe slightly harder because we're going to talk about loops today. Okay, but let's start with this. So this is where I went up to last time. we're given a program over here. So this guy here, this is the program. It's basically just sequential composition of 3 assignments. And then this is the post condition we would like to establish. And we're asking, by putting the precondition to be true, what does it really mean when the precondition is true? That means any input value will be allowed, right? That's true. So such program will be very user-friendly to clients because there's no constraint. However, is that really good? We want to find out. Okay. So now I want to continue very quickly with where I left off. Okay. What I did last time was this. I'll simply lay out, calculate WP, the first one, followed by the second one, followed by the third one. And then I'm going to establish x larger than y. Right? That's what I did last time. And then I'm simply just going to apply the WP for sequential composition twice. Okay? And assume you already knew about this from last time. I'll just continue from there. Okay? You can also watch the recording for that later. So now, let's say we are going to continue from this particular guy here. You can see we got WP, WP, and WP. Right? The principle will be you want to go from inner to outer. Okay? So now, the first one I would like to get rid of is this guy here. Okay? Let me put in orange. I want to get rid of this guy here. How do I get rid of that? So if WP, y is assigned to temp, and then I want to establish x larger than y. Which WP rule should I use for assignments? Right? So what I will put here is I can say WP rule of assignments. You can put a symbol here. That's acceptable. Okay? And then what I will do is I'm going to now do the substitution. For this particular guy here, I'm going to say x larger than y. So that's the post condition I want to establish. I want to substitute every free occurrence of y by temp. What would that be? X larger than 10. Okay? So what I will do is I'm going to do the following. So I'm still going to copy whatever I got so far. Okay, that will be temp is assigned to x, followed by WP, x is assigned to y. But now for the orange part, I can already simplify that. It's going to be x larger than temp. Guys, any question about the first step? I'm just keep trying to simplify. I'm going to do another 2, okay? In the exam, I would suggest, just to avoid mistake, you may want to do one by one. Rather than saying, I'm going to apply the rule for assignments 3 times, for example. You might just make some mistake. I would suggest do one by one step at a time. Okay, so now, which one can we simplify? Okay, from inner to outer. So this guy here. Okay, so now I'm going to say, again, by the WP rule of assignments, the second time. So now for this one here, I'm going to say x larger than temp, and now I'm going to replace every occurrence of x by y. So y over here is the e. So what would that be? Y larger than temp. Agree? Okay. So now I'm going to say WP over here, and then I would say temp is assigned to x, and then for the pink part, I'm going to say y is larger than temp. Okay, we're getting there. You can see just by doing this, now we have reduced the number of WPs from 3 to 1. Okay, final one to do. Okay, for completeness, let's complete that. So now I'm running out of space. Maybe what I can do is let's do that. Okay, so now let's continue with the last one. So now the last one, I want to simplify the blue one over here. Okay, so how do I do that? So now you can see this one here is going to be y larger than temp, the target post condition. Replace every occurrence of temp by x. Right? You can see the x over here is the e. So now what I will do is I will simply say that's equal to y larger than x. Agree? Okay, I'm just replacing this temp over here by x. Okay? Okay, that's it. That's step number 1. What has step number one achieved? It's saying the following. given, let me just tell you the big picture. Given this particular implementation over here, okay, and given this particular post condition, we have calculated the corresponding WP. But now, how do we prove the original program is actually correct? In order to prove or disapprove, we have to bring this particular precondition into play, right? So what should we prove over here? So step number two, should I prove y larger than x implies true? Is that what I should do? Other way, okay? Be careful. If you're being too excited, say, oh, y larger than x implies true, so that should be true. That's wrong. You gotta do the right direction. So what we have just calculated, again, if you refer back to the picture, what we have just calculated was this particular WP. So this guy over here is y larger than x. And the existing q over here is simply just true. Is it the case that true implies y larger than x? No, definitely not. I got to give me some counter example. Okay, we'll get there. Okay, so now again, please don't write that. That's wrong. Okay, so now you want to say the WP somehow. Oh, sorry. Let me do it again. Conceptually, what you're proving is this. You're gonna say the Q, the precondition implies the WP. So now the true implies WP, which is y larger than x. Okay? So now that's apparently not the case. Counterexample. What about equal? Okay? Counterexample. Y equals x. Right? It disproves it. So now the conclusion is this program here is not correct. Intuitively, you're trying to swap x and y over here. You're hoping that after the swap, x will be strictly larger than y. But what if y is simply equal to x? In that case, there's no way for you to achieve it. So that's why the precondition over here should not be just true. It should be at least y larger than x. So that when you do the swap, you can reverse them. Okay, question about this particular program here. This one here actually doesn't really involve if conditionals, but it got sequential compositions, it got assignments. I think that's quite good to actually practice together. Questions? Okay? All right. Okay, so now, so these are simply the proof rules that we have went round over so far. Nothing's new here. I'll just point to you how you should really see them. Overall, given a Hort triple over here, you're going to prove this particular implication as we have done so far. Right? In the case of the assignments over here, and in the case of if conditional, and also in the case of sequential composition, you have to calculate WP differently, and then you want to make sure you can actually use Q as the antecedent and to prove the implication. Okay? That's what the proof rules are saying over here. Okay? I wouldn't go into detail for those. Overall, what you should do is when you're given a program, you have to translate it into Hort triple, calculate WP, and prove that the precondition implies the WP. Okay? That's always the steps. Okay. All right. So now I would like to go to the next topic, loops. Okay? Basically, how do you put the loops into context? So far, we talk about assignments, we talk about if conditional, and we talk about sequential composition. The last one to talk about is to make things complete. So you can mimic any programming language you are trying to do. Python, C#, Java, they all work. Okay? But we'll just use IFO syntax to illustrate the idea. Okay? So now, you can think about, for the middle part, we're going to see some loop. And the loop actually is quite sophisticated. You got exit condition, you got initialization of your loop counter, you also got body of the loop. You also got many other things. Okay? That's what we're going to talk about for the rest of the class over here. Okay, so let's talk about it for the loops. Okay, that's an example we just talked about, but you can also go over that. In the exam, make sure every time when you are trying to show your proofs, you have to include a justification for every step. Okay, so now I will give you the WP rule for sure in the appendix, but you want to make sure how to choose the right one to include. Okay, for the loops, Basically, we're going to talk about loops, just review the syntax very quickly, and also contrast them together against what you're used to in Java. But up to now, you should be quite comfortable with the loops in iPhone. And then we're going to talk about, when we say loops is simply successive approximation, just talk about loop invariance idea. So we'll talk about one loop invariance in detail and show you how things can get executed at runtime. Might give you a little bit different insight into loop invariance, okay? And also loop variance. Okay, for example, we're going to see just for a simple loop like this. Let's say you want to calculate the maximum elements in the array. How would you do it? How do you specify the loop invariance, right? Yes? If you talk about summary, I would suggest we do that a little bit later. Maybe not now. That will break the flow over here. Maybe I'll do that when I review the exam topics. I think that'll be better. Okay, yeah. Okay, so now the loops are very important, okay, and very hard to get right. For example, what if you got infinite loops? How do you prove that your loop is not going to terminate or disprove it? Okay, so that's more about termination. Okay, in order to do that, we're going to use something called variance. And also, off by one, maybe your loop counter shouldn't be incremented this many, or decremented so little, right? Things like that. And also, you got also border cases, okay? And also, let's say you have certain post condition you would like to establish upon the termination of your loop. How do you prove it? How do you know it's really being achieved, okay? And notice one thing here. We talk about termination versus partial correctness, right? So whenever you talk about partial correctness, you just assume the loop is going to terminate. You don't worry about termination at the same time. Okay, you can separate. Okay, but altogether, termination and partial correctness, they're called total correctness. That's something we mentioned in the slides in the previous lecture. Okay, for your curiosity, so page 331 in the textbook that we refer you to in the beginning of the course, they actually try to list 4 versions of the binary search that has been published in the literature, but they're all wrong. For one of the reasons that we talk about, one or more of the reasons. Well, what's the lesson? Loop is hard to get right. So we want to know some systematic method to prove loop correctness, both termination and partial correctness. Okay. Anyway, just for historical reason, I've included this slide here. So now let's say this. Let's talk about the loop syntax very quickly. Okay, I want to review very quickly. Let's say I put iPhone style versus Java style. Okay, but for the exam, you can assume that you'll be given the iPhone style. Okay. Basically, this is the loop. Okay, and this is the loop. Okay, before the loop, we have some precondition. After the loop, we got some postcondition. Okay, we want to make sure starting the loop where Q is true. Is it going to terminate and make sure R, the postcondition, is going to be satisfied? Okay, that's kind of the same big picture we are trying to achieve. In the case of iPhone, you're going to get some initialization over here, which will be executed only once. Similar to if you simply put something before the while loop. Similar. Okay. I will talk about this condition a little bit later, okay? I'll talk about it, okay? And then the body of the loop over here will just be the same. So now the only difference is this. You can see here we say B and we say not B, okay? You can think about whatever Boolean condition you put under until for iPhone, you should put a logical negation of that for the while loop in Java. They mean exactly the opposite thing. So what do I mean? For example, let's see one example here. Let's say until over here, I said until I is larger than 10. Just one example, right? Some Boolean condition. The condition over here is a so-called exit condition. When to exit. So that means as soon as I larger than 10 is true, exit. That's exactly what it means. If you think about the while loop, okay, can you directly put I larger than 10 over here? That's the question. Not really, right? What would it mean if you simply put I larger than 10 over here? So that means while I larger than 10 is the case, I'm going to stay in the loop and execute the body of the loop. That's exactly the opposite. Because on the left-hand side, you're saying that as soon as I larger than 10 becomes true, I'm going to exit from the loop. But this one is saying, if I larger than 10, as long as it is true, I'm going to stay there. So that's not the correct way of saying it. Okay, that's opposite. Okay. So now the way to think about it is, you want to put a negation of that. So not the case, I larger than 10. Okay. So that means as long as not the case, I larger than 10 is the case. Stay in the loop. Okay. So the main purpose of this slide here, I just want to show you, given any Boolean condition B, you have to somehow take the logical negation when you switch the context from IFO being exit condition to another language where it's treated as state condition. That's the main point. Okay? You cannot just use the same condition verbatim. That's not the way to go. Okay? The meaning is simply different. Okay? Any question about the Boolean condition here being the exit condition? Right? That's something you should really know, right? Up to now. All right. Okay, after that, we're going to talk about how you can write contracts for the loops. Okay? And there are two kind of contracts we're going to run. We're going to write. Okay? This slide here, exactly what I just talked about. Okay, we got state condition. Also, we got exit condition. Okay? And also, we're going to see how we can prove the total correctness of your loops. Okay? Total correctness consists of termination and also whether or not you can establish the post condition. Right? So these are the two things we want to prove. How do we prove them? You got to write some contracts to help you. So now let's see the syntax for the loop contracts. Okay? You still got a from keyword over here to start with, and then you put some code over here, which will be executed only once. That's why it's called init, initialization. And then here is some new syntax for the invariance. Somehow you specify the invariance at the loop level, which means somehow the invariance has to be established before you try to execute the body of the loop for the very first time. And also it must be maintained in all the subsequent iterations. Okay? That's why it's called invariant. It shouldn't change. Okay? The truthfulness of that shouldn't change. We'll see example. And invariant should always be a Boolean condition, just like a class invariance, but just at the level of loops. Also, we got until, so that will be the exit condition. As soon as B is true, we're going to exit from the loop. And then we got the body of the loop. So this part here you know pretty well. Okay? And then after the loop body here, we specify another contract called the variance. So the loop variance. Variance simply means it should change between the iterations, its value. Okay? Looping variance should maintain to be true. Loop variance should change its value. And for the purpose of this course, we're going to treat loop variance as an integer expression. Think about this, very straightforward idea. Loop variance might start with a value of 10. And then between every iteration, the variant expression must decrease its value strictly by 1. So 10 to 9, 9 to 8, 8 to 7. Eventually, once you get to 0, that means it's now time to exit. So it's guaranteed to terminate. So the value of the variance should be finite. So that means you got finite number of iterations. Okay, that's kind of intuition, but we'll see example. So that's the syntax you should know. Okay. Any question just intuitively? Syntax-wise, looping variant there should be a Boolean expression. So of course you can use a cross. And for the variant there, it's just an integer expression. Okay. Shetty, you got any questions? Variant, you can think about it as like a counter, yes. How about this? You can think about the initial value for variant is like a measurement of how many iterations you're going to have, approximately. You can think of that, yes. That's why it's an integer. Right? On the other hand, the invariant is more about some property you want to maintain. Okay, let's see some example. You want to understand exactly how the invariants and variants are being evaluated at the runtime, so you can judge. Let me just go through a little bit concept about looping variant and variant, and then we'll see some diagram. Okay? So looping variant and variance. Looping variance is Boolean expression. And looping variant has nothing to do with termination. We only use it for partial correctness. And then typically, okay, so this is something we'll see example. as far as this course is concerned, we're considering the loop invariant usually just a special case of the post condition. For example, let's say this. Let's say the post condition is we want to make sure the result of the query is the maximum of the array. Apparently, the way you're going to run it is by using a loop counter. You want to make sure, let's say the loop counter value is 5. That means we have looked at maybe 4 or 5 elements so far in the array. So that means the maximum of the result we got should be among those 5 elements we have seen so far. For the rest of the array, we don't know yet. Okay? I'm just mentioning that verbally, but we'll see that in one example. The loop invariance, you can convince yourself later. I'm going to give you precisely how that can be specified. Okay, do you want to mention that first? Loop invariant will just be a special case, meaning that we are only concerned about the array we have seen so far. Eventually, we want to have seen the entire array eventually. Okay? Okay, so now loop invariant should be established in the very first iteration right away. Okay, and they should be maintained. Typically, maintenance of the loop invariant is hardest one to prove, usually, but that'll be left as an exercise for you. Okay, I'll refer to some exercise a little bit later today. Okay, the variance is going to be some integer expression for termination. Okay, it's a measurement of how many iterations it would take in order to terminate. So it should be a finite number, and usually has to do with the loop counter. Usually, okay, it should be a number that should be strictly decreasing among the iterations, and then it should be non-negative. So now, if somehow the variance decreases to, let's say, -1, but it's not time to exit your loop just yet, then there'll be a variant violation. Okay? It's a very typical mistake, which I'll show you. Okay, okay, and then it should be the case as soon as it becomes 0, not negative yet, you should really exit from the loop. Okay, one more time, total correctness is really about termination and partial correctness. In the exam, you might be asked accept an isolation to prove. Okay? For partial correctness of the loop, you got to consider loop invariance. For termination, you want to consider loop variance. Okay, 2 different stuff. Well, we'll see. Okay, this slide just for at a conceptual level. So now I would like to go over some very simple example loop with invariance and variance to show you this particular runtime pattern. Okay, let's see that together. Okay. Let's see before I show you the concrete example, let's just get some idea quickly. Okay, you can see over here, so we got some initialization over here. We got invariance I, which is Boolean, and also we got exit condition. We got the body of the loop, and also we got the variance. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We got 5 components of our loops. Okay, let's see exactly how they will be evaluated at runtime. Okay, let's see. So what I would like to do is, let me undo this. I'll start one by one. When we first execute initialization, we're going to go into some states over here. And now, we should check to see whether the loop invariant I over here is satisfied or not right away after the initialization. We want to make sure the loop invariant is established even before the first iteration. If it is not satisfied, you got a loop invariant violation. Okay? And then we're going to check to see whether the exit condition is true or not. If the exit condition is actually true, so that means we want to exit from the loop. Okay? And then if the exit condition is not true, we're going to go into the loop and execute the body of the loop, which is here. Okay? Let's say we go to the end of each iteration. What should we do? Several things we want to do. Number 1, we want to make sure the variance over here, if it is less than 0, remember we said it should be non-negative. If it's less than 0, loop variant violation. Notice one thing. When would be the first time you check the loop invariance? The first time. Before the first iteration, right? When would be the first time you check the loop variance? After the first iteration. Okay, notice that. Okay? It's kind of implicit from the diagram, but I was just hoping that you pick it up. Yes? You will. I will see that. We haven't got there yet, but yes, you will. You can think about this diagram here. After the executed body of the loop for the first time, you want to check the loop variant first, and then invariance. Yes, because we'll go back right to the original states. Okay. Let's say we are good. the loop variant is still logically equal to 0. So now we'll go back to the original state over here, and now this is the time to check the loop invariance again. Right? So now we want to see after the first iteration, has the loop invariant being maintained? If it is not maintained, loop invariant violation. Guys, any question about this pattern here before I give you some concrete example? Yes?
Quick example about like how often we check the invariant. So you said the invariant we check before the iteration and invariant we check after. So if we have a loop that only runs, say, one time, the invariant will be checked the second time after the...
Good question. We will see that, yes. So first of all, invariance is actually checked. Invariant I is checked. You can think about before first iteration, before second iteration, and then also after the last iteration. When I say after last iteration, which iteration means we don't really go to that iteration anymore because the exit condition is true. Okay. What about variance over here? So the variant V over here is checked. It's easier to see the pattern. After first iteration, and also after second iteration, and also until after the last iteration. Okay, that's a pattern of checking that. But don't worry, I haven't seen any concrete example yet, but just want to give you some feel. Okay, it's not complicated. Okay. All right, let's see some concrete example, and then we'll do a little bit of mental exercises, a little bit. So that's the simplest loop I can give to you, simplest one. Okay. I'll make it a little bit bigger. I'll let you stare with this loop a little bit. Okay, just for maybe 20 seconds. Okay. So I got some simple programming statement for every component for the loop. All right. And then I want to know whether I will get to any loop invariant violation or any loop variant violation. That's my question. Okay, we want to see that, right? Let's see exactly how things will be checked very quickly. Okay. You believe there will be violation? How about this? I can tell you, for this very first version I gave to you, there will be no loop invariant violation. There will be also no loop variant violation, I can tell you. But I will change that a little bit just to show you by injecting this particular change, you're going to get violation. So that's how you can compare and contrast. Okay? How about we look at the normal version first? Okay? So what could be on the exam? I might give you some loops with all the 5 components, and then I'll simply ask, are we going to get any loop invariant violation? If we are going to, tell me which iteration precisely, and then explain why. Okay? Things like that. Okay, so now, let's see this. We're basically saying the following. Okay, let's just do a little bit detail trace over here. You can see we are going to initialize I to be 1. Okay, so after this, I is just going to be 1 after this. Okay, are we going to satisfy the loop invariance for the first time? I is 1. 1 is for sure between 1 and 6. Okay, check. So now, I is 1. 1 larger than 5 is false. So we don't exit. Okay? And then we're going to execute the body of the loop. And now we're going to somehow print out the value of I. So it's simply going to print out 1. Okay? And then we're going to increment the value of I. So now that means after this, I will be equal to 2. Right? So now, is it going to satisfy the loop variant? Oh, by the way, loop variant here, I put 6 minus I. Somehow, this integer expression over here is going to decrease every time, rather than increasing. So now that means a very typical mistake. If I simply put just I as a loop variance, would that be okay? It wouldn't be okay because I is going to increase every time, right? But loop variance is supposed to decrease every time. So that's not good. It's a very simple answer to answer. Okay? So now if we simply get 6 minus I, so now V over here will just be 6 minus 1. So we got 5. So that's larger, it's larger than or equal to 0. So we are fine. Yes? Oh, yes. Thank you so much. You're absolutely right. Okay, that because it's 2 over here, 6 minus 2. Thanks. Good. Okay, so after this, we're going back to this particular state, and now is the loop invariant satisfied? So now I is actually equal to 2. Okay, let me just put it here. I is equal to 2. So now 2 is still between 1 and 6, right? And now we're going to keep doing this, right? Rather than tracing this over and over for you, let's predict what's going to happen. Eventually, what should be the console output? You can see we are trying to print out the value for I every time, right? How many lines should we output? 5 or 6? 5 lines? Why not 6? What happened when I is equal to 6?
Well, when the second I is equal to 6 is supposed to exit, presumably until the function.
Exactly. Okay, I'm just testing you. That's good. All right. So now let's think about this. Basically, in the middle of the execution is pretty straightforward. You're going to say 1 and 2, 3, 4, and 5, right? So these are okay. So now let's talk about the last iteration, the last one. The last iteration where you're going to get basically when I is equal to 5, right? Let's talk about the last iteration. When I is equal to 5, 5 larger than 5 will be false. So which means you are still going to execute this for one more time, okay? And then you're going to print out 5 over here. And then I will be assigned to I plus 1. So now that means at the end of the last iteration, I will just be 6. Okay, right? You'll be incremented from 5 to 6. So now question is, are we going to be okay for the variance? 6 minus 6? 0. That's good. As long as it's not negative, we are fine. Okay? So now 6 minus 6 will just be 0, still larger than or equal to 0. That's what we're checking. So now when we go back to this original state, we're going to check the loop invariance. So now are we okay with the loop invariance? Is it between 1 and 6? It is. That's why I put 6 over here rather than 5. Okay? So now it will still be okay. So you can see 1 less than or equal to I is also less than or equal to 6. Okay? When I is equal to 6, that's still fine. Okay? And then when I is equal to 6, 6 larger than 5 is going to give you true. So that means exit. Basically, this simple loop here, when you think about it, we're going to get in total 5 iterations, right? That's why we're going to print out 5 lines. Okay? How many times is the loop invariant checked? 5 times or 6 times? 6 times. Okay? I'll write down the number, you think about it. Number of times loop invariance is checked. 6. How many times is the loop variance checked? At the end of the first iteration, at the end of the second, at the end of the third, all the way to at the end of the 5th. So 5 times. Okay? And also, the number of times loop variance is checked should be 5. Okay? Versus 6. Question?
Like, why would you wait that since check of the invariant would be unnecessary? Because even if we had like I plus
Yes, good question. The reason that loop invariant will still be checked for the final time is actually very important. Okay, I'll mention that because we'll see some maybe more realistic example later about finding the maximum. Okay, the question was, it seems like we are putting I is less than or equal to 6 over here, but somehow, so that means the loop invariance will still have to be checked in the final iteration just before we exit from the loop, right? It will be necessary because, I'll write it down here. Loop invariance when exiting the loop should logically imply the post condition. That's kind of the goal. You want to make sure loop invariant has been established before the first iteration. The loop invariant has been maintained by every iteration. When we exit from the loop, the loop invariant should be strong enough to ensure that the post condition we want to establish is not established. That's something we have to prove. Okay? But we'll see that, don't worry. Okay? From this example, it's not so obvious, but because the example is not very exciting, we'll see something very close to that. Okay, so guys, quick exercise for you, quick. The same program as before, the same, okay? What if I change the exit condition over here to be I larger than 0? What's going to happen? The invariant will be negative. Well, you see, we're only changing the exit condition, right? Why would the invariant be violated? Invariant is fine.
Yeah.
No, infinite loop. Are you sure? Yeah, so first of all, are we going to get any violation in this case? No violation, right? The truth of the matter is, yeah, it's not going to execute anything, right? Okay. Well, this one here simply because you assign I to be 1. 1 larger than 0 is true right away. So exit from the loop right away. You don't even get a chance to go into the loop. Okay? So this one here is exit right away. Okay? Just as a check. All right? Okay, the first one is good. Okay, what about the second one? For the second one here, let's say, oh, I'll talk about different changes in isolation. They are not related, okay? If we exit right away, you still check. Because the question was if we exit right away. Remember, we always check to see the invariant first, and then we check for exit condition. So that means we check it for the first time, and then we go for exit. The variance. No, in that case, no. Yes. But invariant, yes. Yes. Good. Okay, so let me wipe it out. Okay, let's talk about another one here. What about I change the loop invariance over here to be 5? Are we going to get a loop invariant violation? Are we? When? After the last iteration, right? Because remember in the last iteration, we get an increment from 5 to 6. In that case, we're still going to check the invariant before we decide we're going to exit. In that case, if I is simply 6, 6 less than equal to 5, false. Okay? Loop invariant violation. Okay, guys, think about this one more carefully. Okay? Any question about this? Loop invariance violation. Okay? Last one. What if I got the variant here, 5 minus I? Well, am I going to get a loop variant violation? Okay, again, when? The last iteration, right? Because a similar idea, the last iteration, after that, I will just become 6. In that case, 5 minus I will just be minus 1. That's not good. Your loop variant should never, ever get to something that's negative. Okay? All right, any question about this simple example? I want to give you a feel about how things get executed together. Okay? And then we're going to see one example in more concrete context. Okay. Okay, so after this guy here, okay, so now just another diagram to show you, basically. You can think about, basically, we just talk about different sets of states, right? You can think about the way things work. After the initialization of your loop, you're going to the regime over here for your loop invariance. Okay? So now, between iteration, you're going to make sure you always satisfy the loop invariant. That's you're still in the blue area for the loop invariance. Okay? And now, as soon as you actually exit, so that means in this particular states, number one, the green states over here is going to satisfy the loop invariance. That's good. And also, the exit condition here is also going to be satisfied. So that means now we should exit. At the same time, most importantly, the post condition over here is also going to be satisfied. So now you can think about the purpose of a loop really is eventually you want to get to a state. It's going to satisfy, number one, the exit condition. So that means we terminate. Number two, it's going to satisfy the loop invariance. So we can make sure we do the right thing between iterations. Number three, we're going to establish the post condition at the end. That's the final goal. For example, finding the maximum of the entire array. Okay, that diagram just for your information, just more visualization. Okay, so now we're going to consider an example altogether. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about loop invariance. Okay, I'm just going to use a single slide here to illustrate. Okay, and then we'll talk about two versions. Okay, we're getting to the end. What I would like to do now is to give you some code here to consider, and then we'll work out the invariance together. So the code we have is like this. We talk about finding the maximum inside an array of integer, return a maximum. Okay, easy query. We have some loop counter I. We say the following: I is going to be initialized to be a dot lower. You can assume it's 1. Okay, and also the result, which is going to be the maximum so far, is just going to be AI, A1. Okay, invariance we're gonna figure out. Okay, when do we exit? You want to make sure I is strictly larger than a dot upper, not when a is larger than or equal to a dot upper, right? Because you want to make sure you still consider the very last elements in the loop, in the array. And then in the loop, it's very conceivable what you're going to do. If the current element is strictly larger than the current maximum, replace the current maximum, and then increment I. Okay. The variant over here, okay, is going to be a dot upper minus I plus 1. We'll talk about it in just a moment. Okay. Now, the post condition, I can tell you right away what the post condition should be. Well, that's something you guys should be able to write. You can just write a cross loop to make sure result is larger than or equal to every element in the array. So that's why it's a maximum. Right? Are you comfortable with, first of all, the post condition over here? Especially in math over here, right? For all. And also make sure from lower to upper inclusive, and also make sure the result is larger than or equal to every element in the array. Okay, that's a post condition. Okay. Now, how do we come up with the loop invariance? Oh, question. Oh yeah, you're gonna ask me. Yeah, exactly. Okay. So now the loop invariance, I'll give you a little bit hints, and then tell me how I should phrase it. Okay, that's a key. Okay. Let's consider the array over here. Okay, you pretty much know about the code. And we're going to come up with this part here. Okay, that's why I covered that just for now. Okay, the loop invariance, as I said before, is going to be more like a special case of the post condition. I'll give you a little bit hints. What do I mean by special case? The way I phrase the post condition over here is to say from lower until upper, a dot count. Right? I say result should be greater than every element over here until a dot count. But looping variant is going to tell me I want to give a special case when I'm still in the middle of the execution. Meaning that depending on what the loop counter I is, so that means I have only covered possibly only this part of the array so far. So I can only say the result is only a maximum for this particular part of the array. What about this part? I don't know yet. Guys, do you see my intuition? Okay, let me say it again. It's going to be very common for you to write such loop invariance, which is going to be a special case for your post condition. Think about the loop counter I somehow tells you where I have, so like how far I have seen the array, right? So now if loop counter is simply I, it might tell me, for example, it might or may not tell me that I have seen this many elements so far in the array. And then the result should be a maximum for this entire array. What if I'm going to find something that's larger over here? I'm going to update it later, but I don't care for now. Okay? Given this intuition, how do I write the loop invariance? Any, Jetty, I'll give it a try.
Check two things. First, that the I goes from, I'm assuming 1 to...
Sure. So, okay, overall, okay, let me, do you intend to write across eventually? Loop invariance. Yeah. Basically, you want to say somehow for the part I've scanned so far, yeah, result is going to be.
I was going to do that after. I was just checking that the I is correct, and then after that.
What do you mean I is correct? What do you mean by that?
The I goes from 1 to upper plus 1.
Okay, so we're basically looping variance is going to be checked between iterations. So you don't want to measure upper at this stage.
So
Across?
check that from 1 to I.
Okay, 8 are lower if you don't mind. Okay. Yeah, let me say 8 are lower. 8 are lower until I, you're saying? Okay, let's say I. And then all or some? All. You better stay consistent with the post condition. How about that? Result? Oh, actually, I forgot is. Let's say is j over here. Okay, let's say it's j. So result is larger than or equal to a j. Agree? Okay, guys, let me talk about this. Okay, it's good. Okay. Basically, what Shady just said is pretty good. You're saying that given that the current value for I is actually equal to something. Okay, for example, right? And now I'm going to make sure this part of the why I minus 1?
Because they do, like, they put the value and then they iterate. So, like, yeah, they put the value to the maximum and then they iterate after that.
Okay. So guys, so now I tell you what, the tricky thing I want to talk about. Very good. Okay. The tricky thing is, you can see this particular looping variant I'm proposing, or you were proposing, right? Is basically very similar to the post condition we talked about over here, right? I would say the only thing we want to decide together is, over here, should it be I or I minus 1? That's the question. I or I minus 1? I heard I minus 1. Why shouldn't it be I? Yeah, think about the timing of checking the looping variant, right? Think about it. If I put I over here, I'm going to use an example to show you, don't worry. Let's say hypothetically, if I say I over here, right? Think about invariant is actually going to be checked first. Looping variant over here is going to be checked first before the current value of I is going to be used in the subsequent iteration. So going too early. Okay, we'll see example. So now, question for you. It turns out looping variance is really going to be, okay? So by the way, this is wrong version, okay? That's good, Shady, that's nice. Okay. I minus 1, that's the looping variance. But now, can anybody tell me, how is the math going to work when the looping variant is checked for the first time? Say it again?
You get an empty set, so across A.4 to I.
Okay. That's exactly right. Thank you. All right, so guys, let me talk about this, okay? Remember here, after the initialization, looping variant will be checked for the very first time, right? Okay, so now think about this, okay? This one is important. So now for this particular looping variance I have over here, okay? Let me just wipe it out, okay? The correct version should be over here, I minus 1. Oh, let me write it down here. I'm going to say for every j such that a dot lower less than or equal to j and less than or equal to I minus 1. That's the correct version, okay? It is the case, result larger than or equal to aj. Okay, so now that's the looping variance. We want to know what happened in the very first iteration. In the very first iteration, I would just be a dot lower, and we assume a dot lower is simply just 1. Okay? So now I minus 1 will be 1 minus 1, which would be 0. A dot lower is also 1. What's happening here? Is there any range that's satisfiable between 1 and 0? Empty range, right? We actually talked about this in one of the previous example. First of all, this guy over here is simply as if we put false over here. And one of the property you should know about is like this. For every x such that I simply put false over here, which means empty, is the case p of x. That will just be true. Because thinking this way, can I say all the elements in the empty array are positive? Yeah, because you cannot find anything that's not positive in the array as a violation witness. Okay, think about it. The whole thing is going to be true because no violation witness can be found. Okay, any question about this discussion over here? So two things to note. Let me summarize. Two things to note. Number one, the post condition was given to you. It may not be. Okay, maybe in the exam you have to specify the post condition first. Number two, for the loop invariance, as far as this course is concerned, most likely it will be like a special case of the post condition. To make sure you just play with the range of the loop counter to make sure what I have scanned so far in the input array or input hash table, only those are applicable to my loop invariance. Okay? And then you should also know about why it should be I minus 1 over here as opposed to I. We'll see more example. Okay, okay, let's see some concrete example quickly. Okay, I just want to show you one. So now this guy here, exactly the same code, exactly the same. Okay, so now thinking this way. Okay, I'll point to you exactly how the violation can occur. Let's say we got this particular array. Let's say this is A. We got 20, we got 10, we got 40, we got 30. Okay, the table over here, you can refer to the slides just for you to trace the code. I'll go right to the point. Okay, let's say for the loop invariant now, we simply say less than or equal to I. This is wrong. We want to see why we can get into loop invariant violation. We want to see that. Okay, so now a question for you. After the initialization, we say that result should be A1, right? Result. And also we got I over here. Okay, let me just trace only these two variables, okay, to see. Initially, I is simply equal to 1. And the result, I'll say R, is simply A1, which is 20. So that means the maximum so far is simply just 20. Okay? So now, after the very first iteration, are we going to update R? Are we going to? Not really, right? Because we start with I being A dot lower. The first one we're going to look at is simply 20. So is 20 larger than 20? No, so we don't update it for the very first iteration. And then we increment I into 2. So now at the moment, what we're going to compare is result remains to be 20, right? Remains to be 20 over here, right? And then if we look at that, is it the case that result is larger than or equal to A at position 2? Is it? It is 10. But let's go to the next iteration. If you go to the next iteration, that means I is going to be incremented to 3. So far, we still got a result to be 20. We haven't updated yet. It will be done when we execute the body of the loop. We haven't done that just yet. So now, when you say R is greater than or equal to A at position 3, is that the case? No, because over here, R is simply 20 over here, A3 is 40. So now, this is going to give you false. Okay? That's why you get to loop invariant violation. All right? Yeah, think about this case a little bit more carefully. Just point to you right away what the issue is. Okay? The issue is you're only going to update the current maximum to be 40 after the loop invariant is being checked. Only that. Okay? You have to watch the timing. Okay, and also very similar, if I just do another version, that's also in the slides. Let's say the loop invariant is correct. But now, let's say I say A dot upper minus I, as opposed to A dot upper minus I plus 1. Am I going to get to loop variant violation? Thinking this way, okay? The exit condition over here is I strictly larger than A dot upper. So what would be the value that is going to make this post condition, this exit condition false? When I is equal to A dot upper, right? Plus 1, exactly. You were going to plus 1. Because remember, every time, the last one, okay, let me say this again. Otherwise, I'm confusing you. Okay? Thinking this way here, if we keep this like this, the last iteration the last iteration is going to be run when I is exactly equal to a dot upper, meaning that we are looking at the last elements of the array. At the end of the last iteration, we're going to execute I is assigned to I plus 1. Okay, and then, so now I will become a dot upper plus 1. So now when you try to evaluate this expression here, you're going to get minus 1, right? Because a dot upper over here minus this I over here, you're going to get minus 1. So that's when you get a loop invariant violation. So that's why you got to be careful about the boundary cases for loop variance. All right? Questions about this? All right? Yes? Integer expression. Yeah. Loop invariant is simply Boolean expression, and loop variance is an integer expression. Yes. All right, so finally, let's now go over how we are supposed to prove things, okay, quickly. Okay. So now what I want to do is go over a little bit slides with you, and then I'll tell you what exercise you should do. And then we can go over that in the review session as well. Okay, at least you can know what to do. Okay, the two versions, I just talked about it. Okay, so now just go to the final thing over here. So now how do we prove the correctness? Oh, this one is some exercise for you. Okay. I'm giving you something similar to your lab number 2 to get the keys. And now, how do you specify the loop invariance? Okay, exercise for you. Okay, try that. Okay, so now how do you prove the correctness of loops? So now let's say that's what we get. We got some precondition before the loop. We got some postcondition after the loop. And we got loop invariance, we got variance. So these are the things you have to prove one by one. Okay? Let me go over together with you. Okay, just one by one. The first condition you have to prove is as follows. Given the precondition Q, once we execute the initialization, you can establish Li. How do you formulate this condition as a Hoare triple? Eventually, I want to turn this into a Hoare triple. How do I do that? Yes? What should be the precondition? Q. Thank you. S inits. Li. I want to establish Li. Exactly. Okay, that's the first one. Meaning that given this particular precondition, after executing the initialization part of the loop, I want to establish the loop invariance for the first time. Okay? Now, what about the next one? The next one is saying this. At the end of the body of the loop, which means at the end of the first or second iteration, let's say we are not ready to exit. We want to say loop invariance is somehow maintained. What should be the Hoare triple for that? What should be the precondition here? Not B, because we are not ready to exit just yet, right? So, not the case, B is true. And then the body of the loop, right? Good, thank you. And then we want to maintain Li. One more thing to say. You can assume Li was assumed from the previous iteration. That's why I can put Li here as well. Okay? Okay, like that. I and Li, the same. Okay? So now, what about the next one?
You'd also have Li for the previous iteration.
Yeah, you can think about somehow this would be necessary. You want to say that we assume that for the previous iteration, the loop invariant was maintained. Assuming that we start with that. And then also we're not ready to exit just yet. And then after body of the loop, we maintain the loop invariant for the next iteration. Yeah. Actually, Li would be quite important in practice because it's something you don't necessarily have to use, but you put it there just in case. Yeah. Okay, so now the next one. Okay, so now here we got, let's say we are ready to exit. And then loop invariant has been maintained. Now post condition R is actually satisfied. This one is not going to be a Hoare triple. There's no code mentioned over here, right? Any idea? It's going to be implication. Ready to exit, how do we formulate that? B, thank you. And Li maintained, and Li. Yeah, exactly, you see. So one technique I hope you'll pick up is to go from English to some formulation of predicates, right? It's also a valuable technique. Implies are. Okay, so let's do two more, okay? Now I'll tell you the exercise you will have to do. So now I will talk about this guy here. So these three conditions so far, they are just about the partial correctness, nothing about termination. Let's talk about termination quickly. So now what we want to say is, given your looping variance, so now we talk about we don't exit just yet. Not yet to exit, we want to make sure the body of the loop maintains loop variance such that it's non-negative. It's going to be a Hort triple. I can tell you, in the middle, it's going to be S body. What about precondition here and postcondition here? Well, this one's easy, non-negative. V larger than equal to 0, agree? Okay. What about the precondition here? Li also not ready yet, right? So Li and not B. Okay. So I would suggest maybe try to understand what's said informally over there and try to formulate accordingly. Okay. Finally, this guy here, let's say, okay. Given this, and then also we are not yet to exit, not yet. But we want to make sure the LV is strictly decreasing. It must decrease, for example, from 4 to 3, 3 to 2, 2 to 1. Hint to you, you may want to use the O keyword or the 0 subscript that we talk about. Okay? I'll start with, so now given Li, would you agree? I'm going to put Li over here. Not yet to exit, so not B. Okay, and then the body of the loop, that's easy. So now, what should I put here to tell that strictly decreasing LV? Huh? Yep, V is less than V0, exactly. Because V over here will be the new value, strictly less than the old value. That means we're decreasing. Right? Okay. Okay, so several exercises for you. Several. Okay. So that's kind of the post condition you want to. That's kind of proof obligation you want to establish. And now, given this particular program, how do you formulate each one of them? Initialization, before termination, upon termination, and every one of them. I'll leave this particular page blank for you. The answer is on the slides. Okay, do that. Okay. I'll leave that to you. And then there are certain out of 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay, I also left blank for 3 of them are quite trivial to prove. I would suggest at least know how to prove all these 3 together. You can ask me also during the review session if you wish. Okay, I'll let you try first. The most complicated one is going to be about the maintaining looping variance. This one will turn out to be the most complicated one. That one, they'll also give you a solution, okay, to actually go over. But these are something you want to exercise before you go to the exam. Okay? Yes?
So you know how we said can we in the exam assign names to the code?
Oh, yes, absolutely. So the question was, is it okay in the exam? As long as it's clear, then that'll be acceptable. For example, can I simply say, for this part here, I'm just going to call that B. As long as it's clear, then that'll be fine. Okay. Okay, that's about it. Okay, in the slides, you basically just got 2 more proof tips over there for you. I just included them just for you to as a reference. Okay, otherwise everything has been covered over here. Okay. Okay, that's the solution. Try not to look at them just yet. You want to do the exercise first. Okay, so these are some proof tips for you. Okay, this one simply means if you want to prove this particular Hort triple, you can either use Q or P. You can drop one of them. Okay, that's a common tip. Another tip is whenever you're trying to do any array indexing, you better make sure you also include The I over here should be valid index. Okay, that's just telling you. Okay. Okay. Any question about Hoare triple, the whole thing? Okay. Yes. Yes. Sure. This one? This one? This one is saying the following. In order, let's say you're given this. Let's say this is what you want to prove. You can drop, it's given as a conjunction. Okay? You can drop either one of them and prove it. Okay? And if you want to see the proof why it will work, there's some proof over here to show you. Okay? Yeah, go over that. You can ask me later. Yeah. This one just some tip for your proof. Okay, guys, would that be okay? Okay. Let me spend about 1 or 2 minutes just wrap up. Okay, and then we talk about exam, right? Okay, so now for the wrap up the course, okay, we got about 10 or 15 minutes, hopefully. Okay, so I would say think about the design principle we have learned about in this course, right? It's good to reflect. Abstraction, basically contracts, architecture, math models, right? We talked a lot about them. Think about the code level. So thinking in terms of math objects and think about precondition, postcondition, class invariant is very valuable practice for this course. Information hiding, right? You want to keep certain parts stable, right? And also single choice principle, maybe I mentioned this the most, okay? Open close principle, make sure you review that as well. Uniform access principle. We didn't say that explicitly in the class, but as mentioned in Lab 0 tutorial videos, okay? If you have doubts about it, speak to me, okay? Uniform access principle. Design patterns, we talk about quite many, okay? Make sure you're comfortable with every one of them, okay, before you come to the exam. Okay, just want to say a little bit more. If you think back, let's say you go back to Java later, so now when you actually look at the API in Java, so now since you learn about contracts, learn about design by contract, you can now be a little bit more critical about the interface you can see. In some way, they're simply just being too informal. You don't really see the kind of precondition and postcondition you have, like a predicates that you have seen in this course. I'll give you one example. Let's say this. Sorry, it's a bit very small font size. So this is one of the methods called set, okay? It's to set a particular index to be element E, okay, over here, right? But now, the only information you get is the short description over here. But how do you know exactly what this set is going to do? Is it going to replace index I with new element E? Or is it going to shift everything to the right by 1 position? Do you know? You don't necessarily know. Maybe you can test it to find out. But it better appear on the interface. That's something you would have to specify as postcondition for this course. Okay? That's why it's always good to have some idea about the postcondition when you design your code, okay, or your software. Okay? Basically, this one just a very typical example we did, about what's the part that's to be changed and what's the part that should remain the same, okay, in this course. And of course, we got bound diagram to show the contract view. Okay, beyond this course, okay, what if you have a language that does not support DBC directly? Well, maybe you have to use exceptions, you got to use assertion, try and catch. I would say that's okay. You still want to document your code with Java doc. Still, you got a precondition, postcondition. At least think about it. And most importantly, you may want to encode the precondition test, postcondition test in your JUnit test, for example. At least you still test them. What about the math models? Math model is also quite interesting to actually think at a mathematical level. If you don't have such thing, think about it when you do your design. I would say any application you're trying to do, you can always do like a sequence for linear application, or you can do a hash table for like a lookup table, like a map. You can also do graph for the very general relation. So I would say, if you can think about in terms of sequence, function, and relation, and then you can very easily refine them to the efficient data structure. Okay, that's some lesson for you. Okay, well, back in 2030, I kind of recommended you guys some book. This will be one book I would recommend. Okay, it's a very old book, no code over there, basically, but it's a very classic software design book. If you're interested finding out, feel free. Okay, especially if you're interested there's a very interesting idea for software design called tabular expressions. Okay, find it out, what they really mean. That will be beneficial to you. If you want to speak about it, talk to me after class. Okay. Okay, so now finally, I wish you to learn something from this course, and then these are the review sessions for the exam. I'll announce them tonight as well. Okay, if you need it. Yes. Okay. Good. Okay, I will stop the recording over here.